The focus for today is using the project online data feeds to set up your model, understanding the different tables, how they relate to each other, and if we have some time, creating a couple of visuals using that data. With Intelligent, I have been working in the project management industry and helping customers, helping clients for more than 8 years. I do have expertise and a lot of hands-on practice with Microsoft Project Server, and Project Online, which is the cloud-based version, Power BI reporting, Excel reporting, SharePoint, and more. Microsoft Suite has a lot of features, a lot of functionality, a lot of related apps that really lend itself to each other. So if you learn one, it's really just a cascading effect before you can learn the other pieces within that suite. I am certified in managing projects and portfolio with Microsoft PPM. I'm in Microsoft Project and in managing SharePoint solutions. So for our webinar today, our agenda is to talk a little bit about Intelligent, about what we do, the different services that we provide for consulting and training. And then we'll do just a quick few slides on how to connect to data, review common tables, review those table relationships, and then we will jump into a demo, which is where we will spend most of our time today. And then finally, I'll have a conclusion, let you know about some upcoming webinars that we are offering. So moving on to our topic at hand today is Power BI. So the first step in creating this is the Power BI desktop. You can create your reports in either using the desktop or in the web version, again, if you have the proper licensing. I always recommend using the Power BI desktop because it gives you a lot of flexibility. It gives you, I know for me in particular, it gives you a lot more of the options. Very similar to how you have your Excel desktop application and Excel services in the browser. The features are a little bit more limited. You don't have as much free reign to manipulate the data as you need to. For Power BI, today we are just focusing on the data and the relationships, but you can also use Power Query, which is a more advanced way to manipulate your data, and that does have to be done in the desktop version. Our focus is Project Online data today, but you can, again, pull in data from multiple sources. So maybe you use Project Online to manage your projects and your resources, but your company still has a finance software. You have an ERP system for capturing all of that data. Instead of doing duplicate entry, you can use Power BI as a place to pull all of that together. So you can use Project Online, you can use a timesheet system, an ERP system. If you have information that is stored in a SQL table or an Azure database, you can pull all of that into one report. So it seems very streamlined for all of your data, but on the back end, it could be a bit complex, getting all of that data to relate together, aggregate properly, and roll down as needed. Power BI Desktop is a free download. I do have the link here. I will be sending out these slides after our webinar ends today, but it is a free download if you want to download it and try it out. To get to your Project Online data, all of that information is stored in OData feeds. There are 41 tables of information that you can have from Project Online, all the way high level at your projects, all the way down to the very, very, very detailed information that's stored in your individual project schedules. When creating that first connection for the very first time, and we will go through this in the demo, you will go to your Get Data and choose OData feeds. It will present you with a box similar to this, and you will copy your PWA instance. All the way through this PWA, there's usually a projects.aspx or a default. Don't need any of that, all just through that PWA. And one of the big keys, and especially if you're going to be doing a lot of reporting from Project Online, is to remember this suffix that you need to append to the end. It is the /_API/project data. This is what connects to the true OData feeds. Just putting in your link alone will not give you that. You will actually get an error that says it can't connect to the data. So once you have your URL, You have your appendix, your suffix in there appended to the end. Go ahead and click OK. And the next step is to authenticate. Not only do you need to have that Power BI downloaded, but Project Online needs to make sure that you are a user in Project Online and you have the proper permissions to read the data. So to actually sign in and use the data, you need two things. You need a Project Online license, and you need to have been granted permissions to that environment. And that does depend on what role you are going to play inside the tool. So as an admin, you'll have ability to connect. Usually project managers as well, but if you are a team member, by default, those roles don't have ability to connect to the reporting aspect in Project Online. So making sure that you contact your PWA admin to make sure you have the right permissions. And you will always click on organizational account, again, because it is asking to run through your credentials to confirm that you have those permissions. So you do need to go through organizational to get there. Then you'll click on sign in, and you can leave what URL it is at the very top level. And once it does authenticate, it says, yes, I know who you are, and yes, you have the proper permissions. Then it will give you a box saying you're currently signed in and allow you to connect to your data from there. And after that, you can go ahead and click on connect here. And it will pull up your entire navigator. Again, the 41 tables of data that you can get from Project Online. You have projects, timesheets, issues, risks. You can go all the way down. If you have a workflow, there's a table for that information too. The most common tables that are used for your reports, and these are usually the ones that I pull into every report as a starting point, are these 7 that are listed here. So the top one is projects. Adding custom fields to your environment gives you a lot of flexibility into how you're going to aggregate your data. One of the very first questions that I ask organizations when we're deploying Project Online is, when you are in a meeting and you're thinking about your projects, how do you group them? Do you group them by program? Do you group them by location? Do you group them by project manager? And those are the custom fields that we usually start out with for your configuration. Any of those fields that you configure in your environment, you can pull out for reporting and roll up your projects using that. So your projects table here will contain all of the default fields in Project Online: your project start date, project finish date, project owner. You contain all of those higher level details in addition to any of the custom fields that you've configured for your organization. Within each project, you will have your project schedule. Each one of those will have a unique set of task lists. They can be the same if you have templates applied, or they can vary wildly. So for each project, you'll have multiple tasks, which can be pulled out as well. One of the most popular reports that I get asked to create is a Milestones report. Pull out all of my milestones or my 0-day duration tasks and put them on a report. I want to be able to group them still by program, still by platform for my projects table, but I'm pulling those individual tasks from the tasks table. If you're getting into resource reporting, you want to look at availability, a capacity for an individual resource or a group, or forecasting, then you need additional information in there. Your resources table will be pulled from who has been configured in your enterprise resource pool, a common pool of resources that has been configured in your environment. It can contain named resources, generic resource for planning, such as an analyst. I know I need an analyst on my project, but I don't exactly know who that's going to be yet. Or it can contain cost resources, material resources, any of those that you have deemed as important that you want to be able to add to tasks need to have been configured in your enterprise resource pool. If resources are on your project, this is just a word of caution. If you have resources on your tasks, on your projects that are not a part of your enterprise resource pool, it does give you a little icon in your resource sheet with a paper next to it, and that is considered a local resource. And that information will not be available to pull in for reporting. It does have to be at that enterprise level. And as resources are assigned to tasks, then assignments are generated uniquely for each one. So we're kind of going down the list in terms of detail. Our projects, and then our tasks. And for each task, you can have multiple resources assigned, which generates a unique assignment for each person. For example, you can have a task, one task that has 5 different resources assigned to it because you have 5 people that need to contribute. They might not all be created equal. You may have resource A that is scheduled to work 8 hours on that task, resource B that is scheduled to work 20 hours, and so on. They may all have their own number of hours, assignment dates from each other. So each record is created individually in your assignments table. It will say resource A is assigned to task 1 on project ABC, for example. The assignments table is how you can aggregate all of that for your resources for some forecasting as well. If you want to see where everybody is that have spent actual work, the assignments table can get that for you. Going down one more level is your assignment time phase data. I do have 2 stars next to this because depending on the amount of projects that you have, the amount of tasks that you have on each project, your assignment time phase table can be very large. If you have 100 projects that each have 1,000 lines, that each have 100 resources on each one, your assignment time phase table is going to be pretty big, right? Because each resource has a lot of assignments on a lot of projects across your entire portfolio. But assignment time phased gives you a lot of granular information. Looking at forecasting out several months, you want to see where is resource A scheduled in February, then March, then April. Your assignment time phase table will give you that because, again, it breaks out every single thing, not only by assignment and by resource and task, but also by day. So each person is going to be given, pulled from your project schedules, a number of hours per day they're working on each task. So these first 5 bullets up here all come from your project schedules, which ties back a little bit to making sure that the information you put in your schedules with your work and your duration is set up appropriately, because all of that is going to be rolled up into your projects and your portfolios. Issues and risks are also very, very popular tables to pull into your report, and these are stored in your project sites. Each project schedule can have a devoted SharePoint site for it, specifically for that one project. It is a one project to one project site, but it gives you a place to store your issues, risks. You can also store deliverables, and you can do other functionality there as well that's not reportable, like store documents and keep a team calendar. Once you have decided what tables of data you want to pull in, then the next step is to create relationships between them. From looking at your project schedule independently, you can clearly see your projects, which tasks go under it, which resources are on it, and so on. From a table relational database perspective, it is something that you might have to tell Power BI what those relationships are. For example, that one project can have many tasks. I will say Power BI does do a pretty good job of creating those relationships for you. It does usually have those established once you pull in your data. But I always recommend reviewing those relationships before you start building your report, because if for some reason that Power BI gets it wrong, then your visuals aren't going to reflect the correct data. So I have a screenshot here about how to show kind of how those relationships are going in this particular screenshot. And most of the relationships that you will make for Project Online will be one-to-many relationships. For every one project that you have, there can be many issues associated with it, many tasks associated with it. So the link from those two tables will have a 1 on the one side and an asterisk or a star on the other. And that is what has defined that relationship. You can inactivate relationships or edit them, but making sure that the tables know how to talk and relate to each other is very important in making sure that your data is going to be accurate in your report. I have an example of a project status report here. And so we'll go through some of the steps that we just went through together. So connecting to your project online data, the very first time that you open up Power BI, you will be presented with a blank page like this. You can see down at the bottom, you do have different tabs of your report that you can create on, but your data model will serve for the entire report. In your home ribbon, up here at the top are a lot of ways that you can connect to data. You can see you can use an Excel workbook, Power BI data set that may have already been established and provided to you by IT, your SQL server. And if I click on Get Data, here are some common sources of data that are used. So Project Online stores their information into OData feeds. So I am going to click on my OData feed option. I have my Project Online environment up over here. So I'm going to grab my URL, again, only going through the slash right after my PWA. Going to grab my URL and put it in my URL box and append that suffix, _API/project data. If you are connecting through Excel as well, you can do this same process for get data and then OData feeds, and you will use this same URL there as you would in Power BI. Go ahead and do that. I'll go ahead and click OK. And if it is the very first time you're connecting, it will prompt you to authenticate. The great thing is that the very first time that you do that is usually the only time that you're going to need to authenticate. Every time after that, it will remember you've been here before, you've authenticated before, and you won't have to sign in every single time you create a new Power BI report. So I am brought to my navigator, which again gives me all of the different tables of data that I can pull into my report. I can click onto any one of these. For example, if I click on my assignments to get a preview of all of the different fields that are going to be contained here. Let me scroll down to my projects one right here. You can see I have project ID and all of the default fields from Project Online, project currency, project start date, project finish date, along with a lot of other kind of back-end flag fields. So you can select any of the tables that you would like to bring in. You want to bring in your assignments, you want to bring in any of the other tables. And when you are ready, you can go ahead and click load, and it will pull those into your report. The refresh for the very first time might take, depending on the amount of data in your environment, might take a few minutes to get everything loaded in. I already have my data loaded into my report here, so I'm going to go ahead and click cancel. Once you have loaded that information, you'll see there off on the left are 3 different navigation icons. The first one here of your bar graph is your report. That's what we're currently on right now. If I click it, it won't do anything, but it does keep me here on my report. My second here, which is the grid, is what's going to show me those tables of data with all of the fields that are in them. So for this report, off in my fields panel over here, it is expandable and expand and collapsible. So I can see I have 4 different tables of data pulled into this specific status report. I have my issues table, projects, risks, and tasks. If you are familiar with Power Query or you would like to experiment with Power Query, if you right-click and click Edit Query, it will pull open Power Query for you. I'm going to click onto my projects table. This pulls in all of the custom fields. What is most unique about each project is its ID. On the back end of each project, each task, each resource, each assignment, it is tagged with a unique ID. And those IDs can almost always be found in the first columns of your table. I'm in my projects table. My very first column is project ID. This is the unique identifier. You can see it's a very long ID, and it is unique for each project. If I click on my tasks table, for example, I have two IDs. I have one, which is my project ID, and then I have my task ID. My task ID is my unique identifier here because each task is going to be unique. My projects ID can repeat here, again, because multiple tasks can belong to one project. So my project ID can repeat, but my task ID will be unique across every single line in this table. If I click on risks, I have my project ID and I have my risk ID, and my issues will be the same. On my projects table, I have my ID over here on the left. And if I scroll through all of the different fields that are here, a lot of them you might not ever need, to be honest. But a lot of them you may, like your start date, your finish date. If you're looking at project level information, you can have your work, you can have your project manager. And if I scroll all the way to the end of my table, or near the end of my table, are my custom fields. All of the fields before this, let's see, workflow owner name will be the last one, are in alphabetical order. Those are default from the system. You will have them. If you are familiar with your project online configuration, you'll recognize that a lot of these are fields that you may not necessarily have the power to change. Like the word start date, for example, you can't change that because the system owns that field. So afterwards, I can see these are the custom fields that I have built in. Some of these I've configured in this report, but I have project status as a way to identify what status is my project in. Is it in planning? Is it in execution? Is it a closed project? I have my overall health for generating that KPI metric inside Project Online. And if I keep scrolling over to the right, these are all custom fields that I have put into my environment. I have a total benefits, an ROI, a health. All of these are custom to my environment, which will always be at the end of your tables. You can use your search box here to help you find them. I want to look for my risk rating fields. It does a pretty good job of narrowing that down. And if you click it, it will take you to the table and to the field that you searched for. Over here on the left, underneath your table, you have it says model, but it's essentially your table relationships. If I click here, this will show me, flap those over there, zoom out a little bit. This shows me all of the tables of data that I have pulled into my Power BI report. So there was a question. So the custom fields that I have added in here are for Project Online. So if you are in a Project Online environment such as this, they have been configured in here at the enterprise level, and I can populate them for each of my individual projects. If you are using Microsoft Project as a standalone, then pulling those into a Power BI is not possible to aggregate as easily. So my relationships section over here I had those 4 different tables that I have brought in. And Power BI did create these relationships for me. Like I said, it does do a pretty good job of making sure that these all relate to each other. And the uniqueness of the project ID here is key because each one is generated for you on the back end for your project. So if I scroll down here, I'm going to find my project ID. They used to put them at the top here too, but they don't do that anymore. So I'm going to scroll down and find that project ID. When we looked at it in our table, again, it's unique for each project. It's going to have a very unique long ID number. And so I want to use that very unique ID to tie each of my risks, tasks, issues together. Using a field like project name or a custom field kind of lends itself a little bit more to error in relating your data together. If your project name is a little bit misspelled and you correct it, or if your custom field is one character off, a space off, then your data model won't know how those tables talk to each other. So using those IDs are always key into making sure that their correct relationships have been made. So for my projects, I can see it has 3 relationships. It has one for risks. It has a one-to-many. For every one project, there are many risks that can be associated. I'm going to scroll down on my risk table here and find my project ID, which is a common field in both of these tables. And if I hover, I can see that it's both highlighted. So these 2 tables are being linked by project ID. That's how it knows uniquely that this one project has many risks. Again, going back to our tables, there were both of these fields in my risks table. For my tasks over here, if I do hover over that connecting line, it is also using project ID because for every one project, you can have many tasks. Again, or one-to-many. And same with my issues here. If I hover, scroll down here. If I hover over here, it does highlight project ID in both tables. If I double click onto my line, I can edit that relationship, or you can establish new relationships. So if at any time I need to change the way that these 2 tables relate to each other, I can change my dropdowns and select the columns that I want to tie together. If you are pulling in data from both Project Online and from another system, an ERP system or a timesheet, for example, then that might be a case where you have to create that relationship manually. Your cardinality right here, your many-to-one or one-to-many is going to be very important, and that the relationship is active. So I'm going to click back onto my report here. So for my project status report, I have a lot of different visuals, and this is a one project at a time report. You may have status reporting that you have to do on a weekly basis or a monthly basis as determined by your organization. A project status report is great in being able to aggregate that information from your schedules, any issues or risks that you have into one place. So in this example, I have a combination of information from those tables. I have a card here. Open this one up. I have a card visual here that is pulled from projects table. When you're building your report, you'll have 3 different panels over here. You'll have a fields panel, which is very similar to your fields panel when you're looking at your tables. You will have a visualizations panel where you can choose from all the visualizations and then choose which fields are going to be used for them. And then you have a filters panel that you can use to have the visuals filtered or the entire pages or reports filtered. So as I click through the different components of this report that I've built, you can see that my visualization changes, and then the fields that are associated with each one change as well. There we go. Because each visual has a different set of components required to make it work. So my report here is a one project at a time report. I am pulling information from my projects table. If I look over here, I can see my check mark by my projects table. And if I hover over fields, I can see that it is using the information from projects. It's what's in that single quotes at the beginning. I can expand and choose what project I want to take a look at, and it'll filter the rest of the information on this report to show me what applies for this one particular project. Again, tying it back to that unique project ID. I have information that's pulled from my schedule in here, my project timeline. I have some KPI metrics that I have captured in Project Online. I have my issues, I have my risks, my issues over here, and my risks as well, again, to pull that in. And I have a second page of the report that's also being used to filter dynamically. I have my milestones that are being pulled in. I have done a little bit of work to classify them on the back end to determine all of the milestones, which ones are late, on schedule, and completed, as well as any open issues or risks that I have tracked in that project site. I'm going to come back to this blank page in the report. So now that I have added in the data, I've pulled it in, I have confirmed that my table relationships are correct, one project to many tasks. I can start to pull that information together into a report. So you have many different visualizations to choose from. If you use your table at least to start with, it will help to kind of validate some of the data. So you can click on your visual right here. And then in your fields panel, I'm going to start searching for some fields across the various tables that we have. I'm going to look for my project name. And you may notice the fields here do not have any spaces. If I was to go project space name, then it will not find anything. So everything by default in your data model has no spaces. So if I search for project name, I can see that that is a field in all four of the tables. When you are creating your report, it is important, again, to remember what is the purpose of the report. What is the main goal? In this case, it is to focus on projects, one project at a time. So I am going to pull most of my information, if I can, from my projects table right here. So I'm going to bring my project name into my value section, expand my visual there a little bit. And now I can pull in some other information that I want. So I would like to see not only my project name, I want to see when that project is going to start. So I'm going to search for my project start date. And you can drag it, or you can check your box right here. And you can see for your date fields, there are two different ways to display. The first way that it displays by default is in a hierarchy. So it's going to take that one date that in Project Online might say October 15th of 2020, and it's going to break it into a quarter, year, month, and then the day. If that is information that is helpful for you to see, then you can use all of these, or you can just take away the pieces that you do not want to see. I'm really only interested in the quarter and the year, so you can use that as a metric that you see. The other way is to see just the straight date. I just want to see October 1st of 2020. You can click the drop down by that field and click on, instead of date hierarchy, just choose the field, choose project start date. And you'll see it does then format it. There is a time associated with all of the date fields in Project Online, but it does at least pull that into your table. We can also pull in our project finish date. And I'll check it. I do not want it to have a hierarchy, just a regular date. So I have some information pulled from my project table. So now I'm going to pull some in from my tasks table. So I'm going to look for task names, and I am going to pull that one into my report as well. I found my task name from my tasks table. I pulled it in. So now I can see that I have a lot of different tasks here. It is in alphabetical order. But now my project name is repeated. Before it wasn't repeated because everything was pulling from the projects table, so there was only one record to find. But now I have all of the different tasks for each of the projects. I keep scrolling down here. Here's another project with each of the tasks in that corresponding project schedule. If you'd like to create something like a milestone report, then you can look for some of those backend flag fields. Task is active. Task is milestone. Tasks table has that, your resources and your projects to flag those things on the back end. If a task is active or inactive, if a resource is active or inactive, it will always start with task is or resource is. So in this case, I have 4 different ways that I can look at my individual tasks. Task is either active, a milestone, a project summary task, which is your line 0 at the top, or just a summary task, which means that it has subtasks or child tasks under it. So I can pull that into my report as well, with my true or false, so that I can see if those are milestones. If your relationships for your report have not been defined or they are not correct, there is an error that you may receive. So I'm going to come back to my relationships here. And since I've pulled information from both projects and tasks just to show you kind of what that might be like, I'm going to inactivate that relationship and then come back to my report. If those tables, if you pull data from multiple tables, but you haven't told Power BI how they talk to each other, then this is the error that you'll receive. You can click your see details, but it's going to let you know it can't display it because it doesn't know what you want it to do. And if you click on your see details, it does let you know it's because it can't determine the relationships between the two of them. You can fix it by clicking here and it tells you what it should do. Or as we know, we can go back to our relationships here and create that relationship, or in this case, activate it once again. Come back to my report. And now everything here looks as I expect it to with the proper data. I can use my filters panel here to then any of the fields that I have pulled into this visual will show up by default, just saying it's showing me everything. But if I want to focus, for example, on only my tasks that are considered milestones, I can do my drop down here and say only show me the ones that are true, that it is in fact a milestone. And so this will pull in for each project. It'll show me each of the tasks along with the date. This is the project date, along with the tasks here, all of the milestones. So in this particular project, there are several milestones here. For my audit tracking solution, there are several milestones for that project as well. And then for true Power BI interactivity for that report, creating different slicers or different pie charts will help so that you can really interact with your report. I'm going to click into my white space here and add in a slicer I'm going to say for project name. My projects table. So I can look by project names. I can say only show me my milestones that are in my content filtering project, and it will filter those. And being able to roll up that information to another project level field, you may decide to use something like a business unit. Take it out, let's clear that filter. So in this example, I have 4 different business units in my project online environment. I have cleared my filters to say these are all of the milestones in my entire portfolio. But I can use my business units as a slicer. Say for business unit 3, I want to be able to see the milestones for those projects. So I click on my business unit 3. These are all of the projects that I have classified as belonging to a particular business unit. This is the project start and finish. And then these are the milestones that belong to that business unit. You can click on business unit 4, and this shows me a different set of projects that pertain to it. Click again to clear that filter. So that concludes our webinar here for creating that connection to project online tables and to creating those different table relationships. We do have several other webinars that have been scheduled for the next upcoming weeks. We have one for 8 steps to scheduling success, which focuses on Microsoft Project and all the way to get your project from a blank schedule all the way through managing your progress, estimating your work and duration, setting up your resource pool, tracking progress, linking your tasks, all the steps to get your project schedule into shape. And then we have one for tips and tricks for Power BI, and this will focus a little bit more on Power Query, how to make an efficient Power BI report so that it refreshes quicker. You can do some fancier functions like replacing values and filtering your columns. We have a tips and tricks for project managers with Project Online that focuses on your project setup as well as accepting task updates and approvals from your team. And then finally, an understanding Project Online security to walk through all of the different security groups that you can have in Project Online, what the default abilities of each one is, and how to update that and how to understand all those components. I appreciate everybody who was able to join us today. If you have any questions, you can send me an email directly, or you can email our info email address. Both of those are up here. And as I mentioned, I will be sending out a copy of this presentation so that you can have it for follow-up and for reference.